I noticed her before she ever spoke to me. Not because she was loud. She was sound. She moved through the world. It's like a secret half-shadow. Half-sky. People didn't really look at her. Not the way I did. They saw her like you see fog on a window there. But unreachable. But I saw something else. A fracture. A flicker. A flicker who looked like she was always standing next to an exit, but never walking through it. And then one day, without warning, she sat down beside me. Didn't ask. Didn't smile. Just placed a thermos between us, looked out at the sky, and said, "If I disappear, will you remember I was ever here?" That's how it began. Not with a laugh, not with a name, but with a question I've never been able to answer. The first time I saw her, she didn't speak, but somehow, I heard everything. It was November, and the sky had turned the color of an old bruise. I was 13, and the world had already decided I would not be soft. My backpack sagged with unfinished math and a sandwich I would never eat. The rooftop wasn't mine, but it was the only place. I could breathe. I never expected anyone else to be there. She sat near the edge, legs folded, elbows on knees, like she'd been waiting for someone or something that had never arrived. The wind lifted strands of her hair and scattered them across her cheeks. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Something about her stillness spoke louder than any. Hello. She was like a statue built out of heartbreak and endurance. Not fragile, just ... Still. I froze, like I'd stepped into someone else's dream. For a second, I thought maybe she was a ghost. Then she blinked. Slow and calm. And reached for a thermos sitting beside her. She took a sip, then she offered it to me. No words, just a quiet gesture in the wind. I didn't move. I didn't know if I wanted to run or cry or sit. Beside her for the rest of my life, my heartbeat made my whole body feel too loud still. I walked forward. Each step felt like it echoed against something hollow inside me. I sat, cross-legged, careful not to make noise, as if speaking would shatter the moment. She didn't smile, but she didn't turn away either. We sat there, two kids who hadn't yet learned how to name the heaviness inside us, and somehow, that was enough. That was the first day there would be. Others, many others. Some quiet, some chaotic. Some that would change everything, but that first one, we never spoke. And I think that's why. I remember it so clearly. Because sometimes silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's the only language. Two broken things can speak. I didn't ask her name. She didn't ask mine. The city below us was a low hum. Like a radio station half-tuned. Cars crawled through the streets like tired animals, somewhere far off. A dog barked once and then gave up. She pulled her hoodie tighter around. Her shoulders dot the thermos, sat between us like a peace offering from a country neither of us belonged to. I stared at it. She didn't nudge it toward me again, but she didn't take it back either. That was the thing about her. She never forced anything, not even kindness. She just made space for it and let you decide whether you were brave enough to step into it. I reached out and took the thermos. The metal was warm, and my hands were cold. I took a sip without asking what was inside. It was bitter and sweet and unfamiliar. Something with cinnamon. Maybe she didn't react. I placed it back between us, and we sat like that to strangers in a shared silence that felt older than either of us. Time passed like fog. No shape, just presence. When the sun slipped behind a cloud and didn't come back. She stood up. I thought she would say something then, tell me her name, ask mine down anything, but she didn't. She just turned and walked to the stairs, before disappearing. She looked back once, not like a goodbye, more like a comma, as if the sentence wasn't finished yet. I waited until, I couldn't hear her footsteps anymore. Then I stood up too. I didn't know why I felt lighter. Or lonelier, maybe. Both. The next day, I returned to the rooftop. I didn't expect her to be there, but I hoped. Hope is a strange thing when you've spent most of your life pretending you don't need it. She wasn't there. I sat anyway. The wind felt sharper, the silence less shared. But I stayed because something in me had shifted, or maybe awakened. For the next 3 days, I came back. Each time a little earlier. Each time a little earlier. Each time a little more certain I was chasing a ghost. Then on the 4th day, she was already there. Same spot. Same posture, like she'd never left. Like I had been the one missing all along. This time, she looked at me, not for long, just enough to make me feel like I wasn't invisible. She pulled out the thermos. Again, Dot held it in her lap. Didn't offer it this time. I sat beside her anyway. Not close, but not far. A respectful silence, like a church, made out of weather and quiet breathing. The wind tangled our hair in the same direction. For some reason, that made me feel safe. We stayed until the first star appeared. Then she stood and left again. No words, no promises, just presence. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to fill the silence with anything at home. My mother asked where I'd been. I lied, said, "School library." She nodded without looking up. My father was working the night shift again. My brother was locked in his room playing video games, loud enough to drown out the world. No one noticed the cinnamon smell clinging to my sleeves. No one asked why I kept looking at the sky like it had started whispering. The next time we met on the rooftop, she brought a book. It was thick and worn, with corners curled like autumn leaves. She didn't read it, just held it in her lap. Like a small animal. I wanted to ask about it, but I didn't want to break the rhythm. Instead, I reached into my own backpack and pulled out a pen. No notebook, just the pen. She watched me scribble on my palm. A word, then another. Then I held it out to her. She stared, then smiled. Just a little, enough to change something in the air. She reached for the pen, wrote on her own hand, held it up. 2 words, no voice. But I heard her clearly. Hi again. I didn't smile back, not because I didn't want to, but because smiling felt too small for what I felt. So I wrote, still bitter. She looked confused. I pointed to the thermos. She laughed then, a soft sound, brief and accidental, like it had escaped before she could catch it. We wrote back and forth like that for an hour. Little words, half sentences, jokes in fragments. It was enough. It was more than enough. Her name was Saba. I didn't learn it until the 7th rooftop. She wrote it on a napkin and folded it twice before handing it to me like a secret. I didn't ask what it meant, but later that night, I looked it up. It meant morning breeze. And suddenly, everything made sense. The way she moved, the way she stayed just long enough to change the air, then left before you could thank her. The way her silence never felt empty, just early, just arriving. I was still me, still the quiet kid who never raised his hand in class, still the boy who erased his drawings before anyone could see them, still the person who flinched when someone said his name too loudly. But now there was this new thing inside me, a small, warm flicker, like something that had never had a name before, was finally beginning to hum. And every time I sat beside her, I felt like I was learning a new language, one without words, but full of meaning, full of pauses that mattered, full of looks that said, "Me too." We never called it friendship. We never had to. It was softer than wind, that stranger than that, more like ... recognition, like 2 puzzle pieces that didn't fit the box. They came in but somehow fit each other, and in a world that made noise, just two filled the silence. We found peace in leaving it empty. Or maybe not empty, maybe just full of things that didn't need to be spoken. Saba didn't come to school. Not that I ever saw her there. I'd never asked what grade she was in, or what class, or if she even went at all. Some friendships exist outside the system, outside attendance sheets and cafeteria tables. Ours lived in the wind above the city and the silent exchange of borrowed warmth. Still, one day I saw her in the street. She was walking 3 steps behind a woman with a scarf pinned tight under her chin and a silence wrapped even tighter. I slowed my bike and watched from the corner. Saba didn't look up, but her hand brushed the edge of the woman's sleeve, soft and fast, like a whisper asking permission. The woman didn't flinch, didn't smile, just kept walking, and followed like a shadow that had learned not to ask for sunlight. I wanted to call out "wave, smile," something, but I didn't. I just watched until they turned the corner and vanished like smoke. The next rooftop meeting felt different. She didn't bring the thermos, didn't bring the book, didn't write anything. She just sat there, legs drawn up to her chest, and stared out at the darkening sky. I sat beside her anyway. I wanted to ask if she was okay. But the air between us had changed, heavier, like a storm that hadn't started but had already been felt. After a while, she reached into her pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. Not a napkin this time. Lined notebook paper, creased down the middle. I unfolded it slowly. Her handwriting was small and slanted. 4 lines. Some people live loud, others live small, but I live in the space between the two. That was it. I folded it back and didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes. We didn't speak for the rest of the hour, but that piece of paper stayed in my pocket like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. That winter came early, not with snow, but with a kind of chill that settled in your bones and stayed, even under blankets. The city looked gray and tired and still. We came to the rooftop every week, sometimes twice, sometimes in silence, sometimes exchanging small drawings on scrap paper. She once drew a window with nothing outside it. I drew a door that wouldn't open. She smiled at that, like I had understood something unspoken, like the door and the window belonged to the same house. One day, I told her about my father, how he used to sing to me in the car when I was little, how now he mostly spoke in instructions, how I missed someone who was still alive. She didn't say anything, but she took off her mitten and reached out, her pinky finger toward mine. I stared at it for a second, then hooked mine around it, and we just sat there, 2 kids with pinkies locked, and 1,000 unsaid things pressed between us like folded paper cranes. Later that night, I cried in my room, not loudly, not broken, just slow tears that didn't know where else to go. And for the first time, I didn't wipe them away, didn't hide them, didn't feel ashamed because someone had seen me and not run. Not tried to fix, not tried to name what I was feeling, just stayed. Saba never asked me to meet her. There were no plans, no texts, no reminders, just a shared knowing, like a tide that returned without being called. I began to leave drawings in her spot when she wasn't there. Small sketches on leaves or old receipts. She began leaving answers. Paper boat with a heart drawn on it. A broken crayon in my favorite color. Feather tucked in a candy wrapper. We were building something, not a friendship the way the world defines it. More like a garden no one else could see, a language only we spoke, a place where nothing had to be said to be understood. One evening, she didn't come, and the next, and the next. I waited through dusk and into dark. The city buzzed below me, indifferent. The wind felt sharper than before. Lone, Lier. I went back every day. No sign, no notes, no thermos. Just the hollow space where she used to sit. I tried to tell myself it was fine, that this was always temporary, that we owed each other nothing. But lies sound different when you speak them only to yourself. Colder, more brittle, I started. Drawing again. On walls, on my arms, on the inside of old notebooks. Always the same two things. A girl on a rooftop. A boy with too much silence in his hands. Weeks passed. I stopped going to the rooftop, stopped looking for cinnamon in the air. Stopped waiting, or at least tried to. But something had already rooted inside me. Something that didn't know how to stop growing, even without sunlight, even without her. Then one day, after a month of nothing, there was a note on my window, taped on the outside, soaked at the edges, barely holding together. One sentence, "Did you keep the poem?" I didn't sleep that night. I read the line over and over, like it was a secret spell that might bring her back. And the next morning, I ran. Not walked, not biked, ran. Too. The rooftop. Heart in my throat. Breath coming in, gasps, and there she was, sitting. Cross-legged back to the wall. Thermos in her lap, no smile, just presence. And when I sat beside her, she looked at me not like someone who'd been gone, but like someone who had finally returned to where she always belonged. We didn't talk about where she had been. We didn't need to. She passed me the thermos. I took a sip. Still cinnamon, still bitter, still hers, and we sat there like no time had passed at all. Because in some friendships, time doesn't move in days or weeks. It moves in silences, kept in glances exchanged, in pinkies held beneath a sky that doesn't ask questions. And in that moment, I knew. This was not a beginning or an end. It was a thread, one that would stretch. Across years, across wounds, across everything. And even when the words weren't there, the meaning always would be. It started with a bruise. Not mine, not one I could name, but one I saw blooming just below the sleeve of her shirt as she reached for the thermos. She didn't notice me notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to say anything. Either way, the silence between us shifted. Still soft, still sacred, but carrying weight now, like a glass floor. You can walk across if you're careful. We sat with it, didn't look at each other for a while. Didn't sip the tea, just listened to the wind circle us like it was searching for something it had lost. Eventually, she pulled her sleeve down, and I didn't ask because some questions aren't questions. They're knives, and sometimes love means not using them at school. Everything looked the same. The bell rang, shoes squeaked. People laughed like nothing ever hurt them. I passed by faces I would never remember and names that never remembered. Mine. And then I saw her. In the hallway, alone, walking like someone had told her not to take up space. She didn't look at me, but I followed. Not close. Just enough to feel connected to something real. She slipped out the back door, down the alley, onto the street, and disappeared. I didn't follow after that, because sometimes presence means knowing when not to chase. That night, I opened the folded poem she had given me weeks ago. Read it under my blanket like it was scripture. 4 lines, still enough to make the room feel less empty, still enough to make me believe in something I couldn't name. A few days later, she left something new on the rooftop. A cassette tape? No. Label, just an old transparent plastic case with fingerprints smudged across it. I held it like an artifact, ancient, important. I didn't ask who it belonged to, didn't ask what was on it. I just slipped it into my pocket and nodded once. She nodded back. Then we sat in silence, staring at nothing in particular, letting the city move around us, letting the moment mean whatever it needed to. At home, I borrowed my father's tape player, snuck it into my room, closed the door like I was sealing a vault, pressed play. There was static at first, then a soft voice, female, breathy and raw, singing something low and sad, and not in English. I didn't know the words, but I felt every single one, like they'd been written in the space between my ribs. I listened 3 times, then fell asleep with the player beside me, woke up with dried tears. I didn't remember crying. The next time I saw her, I returned the tape. Didn't say a word, just handed it over like a secret that had been safely kept. She gave a small bow of her head. Thank you without sound. Then she handed me something else, a disposable camera. Only 2 shots left. She pointed at the sky, then the ledge, then me. And I understood. We took 1 photo together, side by side, not smiling. Then one of our hands on the concrete, mine ink smudged. Hers scarred with faint lines like rivers on a forgotten map. It felt like memory being built in real time, like proof that silence could take shape if given light. One morning, the rooftop was locked, no access. A rusted chain wrapped tight across the gate. I stared at it for a long time, then turned and left without texting her, because I knew she didn't have a phone. And even if she did, I wouldn't have known what to say. We weren't the kind of friends who filled gaps with apologies. We were the kind who waited, listened, trusted the wind to carry what needed to be heard. She found another rooftop, a smaller one. Rusty railing, cracked concrete, still high enough to feel like we were above the world, still hidden enough to belong to us. She never told me how she found it, just left a chalk arrow on the pavement pointing toward the fire escape. I followed without hesitation, and when I reached the top, she was already there. New thermos, new silence, same girl, same gravity. This time, I brought something too. A paper envelope with 3 of my old sketches. Not my best ones, not the polished ones. I hid in drawers, just the raw ones. The ones I drew late at night when the house felt hollow, and my skin didn't fit right. She looked at each one, slowly, carefully, like they mattered, then folded them back into the envelope and held it to her chest. I looked away, because sometimes being seen feels like being split open, even when it's gentle, even when it's safe. "Do you draw yourself?" she wrote, finally. I shook my head. She tilted hers, waiting. I wrote on my palm, "Don't know what I look like inside." She nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a mirror. Held it up to me. I flinched. Not because of how I looked, but because of how easily she made me look. Then she wrote something on the glass with her finger. Invisible words in fog. A language even mirrors could hold. I didn't try to read them. I didn't need to. One day, she brought a scarf and asked me to close my eyes. I did. She wrapped it gently over my face and tied it behind my head. Then she placed her hands on my shoulders and turned me slowly. Once, twice, then stopped. "I want you to find me," she whispered. It was the first thing she'd ever said out loud. I froze, not because I didn't want to move, but because the sound of her voice made something collapse inside me, like a door opening in a room I didn't know I had. I took 1 step forward, then another. The rooftop was quiet except for my footsteps and my heartbeat. And when I found her just 3 steps away, she laughed. And that laugh was louder than any city. We began to speak more after that. Not much, not always with words, but enough to name small things. Enough to trace the outline of what we were becoming. She told me her favorite color was the gray of the sky before it snowed. I told her mine was the blue of her shoelaces. She told me her father was somewhere else. I told her mine lived down the hall but still felt a world away. She told me sometimes she had dreams where she floated above the city, and no one noticed she was gone. I told her I'd notice. Even in a dream, we still used silence, but now it had texture, a shared space, a woven thing, and in it, we began to carry each other's echoes. Not to fix, not to erase, but just to hold, because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone isn't to pull them out of the dark, but to sit beside them and whisper, "You're not alone here." Somewhere between winter and spring, the silence cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a hairline. Fracture small enough to miss if you weren't paying attention. But I was always paying attention to her. She had started writing less, showing up later, leaving. Earlier, her thermos stayed full longer. Her eyes stayed somewhere else, not angry, not gone, just distant. Like her body was here, but her spirit had floated 5 rooftops away and forgotten how to come back. I didn't push. I didn't ask, but inside me, something started to ache, like a house shifting on its own foundation. The quiet between us wasn't soft anymore. It was tense, like a held breath that had lasted too long. One afternoon, I drew a picture of her, not perfectly, not with skill, just honestly. Her posture, the way she held her sleeve, the hair curling at her collar. I gave it to her folded, watched her unfold it, waited for a smile. She just stared too long, then folded it again, neatly, slowly, placed it back in my hands. "I don't want to be seen right now," she said, soft, barely audible, but sharp enough to cut through the wind. I looked down, my throat felt dry. I nodded, didn't say anything, didn't look up again, because when someone says they don't want to be seen, you don't argue, you disappear. I didn't go back the next day or the one after. I thought maybe she would leave something, a note, a sign, anything, but the rooftops stayed empty, so I stayed away. And in that space, the sadness bloomed, not like fire, not like a wound, but like mold in a quiet corner of a room no one checks. At school, stopped drawing, stopped listening, started folding my notebooks into sharp corners and watching them fray. My mother asked me once if I was okay. I told her I was just tired. She didn't ask again. 2 weeks passed, then 3, and just when I had convinced myself it was over, I found a photo tucked inside my locker. No name, no note, just a photo. It was one of the pictures she'd taken with the disposable camera. Our hands side by side, still connected, no faces, just proof that something had existed. Something real, something worth remembering. I went back to the rooftop that evening, no hope, just habit, and she was there, curled up in her jacket, thermos between her knees. She looked older, not in her face, but in her stillness, like life had demanded something from her and she hadn't said no fast enough. I sat beside her. She didn't look at me, didn't speak, but after a long time, she handed me a piece of paper. I unfolded it slowly. Inside, in tiny letters, she had written, "Sometimes I leave so I don't break what's still whole." I didn't know what to say, so I took the pen from my pocket and wrote underneath, "But I'm already cracked." She read it, exhaled, and for the first time in weeks, she reached for my hand. No pinky this time, just her whole hand, warm, shaking, warming, shaking, open, and I gave her mine. Because some fractures don't need fixing. They just need a place to rest. That night, we didn't talk much, but our silences softened again, turned back into blankets instead of walls. She told me her mother had been quiet lately. That quiet in their house meant something worse than yelling, that she didn't know if she wanted to run away or dig deeper roots, That some mornings she woke up and felt like a window someone forgot to open. I didn't give her advice. I didn't offer solutions. I just said, "I'm here," and she squeezed my hand like that was the only thing she needed to hear. Later that week, we painted on the rooftop. Not good paintings, just wide, messy brushstrokes on cardboard and broken furniture we'd dragged up from the alley. She painted a sun with no sky. I painted a door again. This time, it was open. She smiled when she saw it, touched the corner with her sleeve, and whispered, "Maybe someday." I didn't ask what she meant, because I already knew. The wind changed. Again subtle lighter, she came to the rooftop more often. Sometimes even before. I got there, she brought books again, new tapes. One had rain sounds and cello music and a girl whispering. Poetry in French. I didn't understand a single word, but I listened to it over and over, because the sound reminded me of her. Soft, unfinished, necessary, spring came slowly. And one day, she brought scissors, held them out to me. I stared. What for? I asked. She took off her jacket, unraveled her braid, held her hair in one hand, and said, "I want to feel new." I hesitated, then took the scissors, cut carefully, gently, held the fallen braid like it was something sacred. She smiled after, touched the ends, said she felt lighter. I nodded, because I did too. We sat there, pieces of her hair in a shoebox beside us, and watched the city breathe. And in that moment, I realized something. We weren't just filling silences anymore. We were making memories, quiet ones, but permanent, etched into the air like graffiti. No one would ever paint over. We stayed there until the stars showed up, one by one, patient, unhurried, like old friends. Returning home, she leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel too much or not enough. I just felt right, and in that stillness, with her beside me, with the whole world soft and full of maybe, whispered, "Thank you for finding me." She didn't reply, but I felt her nod, slow, certain, and everything in me settled. Because in that moment, I knew we had built something no storm could shake. A language, a place, a promise. And even if the world never gave us words for it, we didn't need them. Because we had each other, and that was enough. It was bound to happen. Nothing that sacred stays hidden forever, not even silence, not even us. It began with a rumor. Someone had seen us on the rooftop from the building across the street. 2 figures. One leaning on the other. Someone whispered. Someone laughed. Someone told someone else. By the time it reached the school hallway, it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a sentence, a judgment, a headline. We never wrote. They called her the girl who climbed roofs to be alone with the quiet boy who didn't talk. They said I was in love. They said she was just being nice. They said things we never gave them. But silence in public is an invitation to assumption, and people hate questions with no answers. I heard them near my locker, saw the sideways glances, felt the laughter clench in my chest like a second heartbeat. She wasn't there, hadn't been at school for days. I wondered if she knew, if she felt the shift too. I kept my head down. I didn't respond, because what could I say? How do you defend something that has no name? When I saw her again, her eyes were different. Still warm, still steady, but guarded, like she had pulled something inside her chest and shut the door. I told her about the rumors. She didn't blink. I knew they'd find us eventually. She said. Her voice was even, almost too even. I don't care what they think. But I did. Not because I was ashamed, but because something precious had been touched by hands that didn't know how to hold. We still went to the rooftop. But the silence wasn't ours anymore. It had cracks now, gaps where things used to be. We sat apart, not far, just less close. Like we were trying to protect the space we'd built by not stepping too hard into it. Like one wrong move might tear the whole thing apart. I drew less. She spoke less. The thermos stayed. Unopened spring began to bloom in colors neither of us mentioned. The city felt louder, everything did. Even the birds, even the sky. One day, she brought an old shoebox, sat it between us without explanation. Inside were the drawings. I'd given her the paper boats, the chalk pieces, the napkin with my name, all the small things we'd built. I stared at them like artifacts from a version of us I wasn't sure still existed. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. Are we okay? She didn't answer right away, just picked up one of the drawings and ran her finger over it like she was tracing back time. Then she whispered, I miss us. I didn't know if she meant the rooftop us or the before the rumors us, or the version of us that never had to explain itself. So I said the only honest thing I could. Me too. We sat there with the box between us, like it could carry us backward, but boxes only carry things forward. Memories don't rewind, they just echo. A few days later, saw her crying, not at the rooftop, not alone at school. In the hallway, head against a locker, hands clenched, a teacher nearby pretending not to notice. I wanted to go to her, wanted to say something, anything, but she looked up, saw me, and shook her head just once, like a wave goodbye that hadn't left the shore yet. She didn't come to the rooftop that week, or the one after. And this time, I didn't wait. Because waiting felt like pressure, and love whatever kind we had should never feel like that. Instead, I wrote her a letter. One page, simple, tearful, full of the kind of words we never used out loud. I didn't say I loved her, but I said I remembered. I remembered the thermos, the chalk arrows, the scissors, the night with the photo. The first time she held my hand, I said that no matter what anyone called us, we were something, and that mattered. I left the letter taped to the underside of the bench where we used to sit. Didn't check if it was taken, didn't look back, just walked away. Weeks passed, the rumors faded. People found new things to talk about, new stories to bend. I went back to drawing, but not the same things. Not windows, not doors. I started drawing bridges. On napkins, on my arm, in the dirt behind the school. Bridges between rooftops, between hands, between hearts that didn't know how to speak but still wanted to reach. Then one night, the doorbell rang. I opened it, and she was standing there. No bag, no thermos, no shoes, just wet socks and eyes full of lightning. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside. She walked in like a ghost returning to a house. I remembered her. We sat on my bedroom, floor cross-legged, facing each other. She took out a crumpled paper from her pocket. My letter, reed thin and worn, folded a dozen times, and then, without warning, she began to cry. Not soft, not quiet. The kind of crying that shakes everything. The kind that empties you out. I didn't hug her, didn't touch her, just sat there until she leaned into me. And I held her like I was holding our entire friendship in my arms, like if I let go, it might not come back. When the crying slowed, she whispered, I didn't know if you'd still want me. I looked her in the eyes. I never stopped. We stayed up all night, talking, for the first time, really talking. About the rumors, about our parents, about fear, about needing something you can't explain to anyone else. We didn't name what we were. We didn't have to. We just said what hurt, what healed, what we wanted to keep sacred. In the morning, we walked barefoot to the rooftop. The sun was just rising. City still asleep. She opened the thermos. Steam curled into the air like forgiveness. We passed it back and forth, wordless, whole again. Not because the world understood us, but because we chose each other anyway. Some friendships are loud, Ours wasn't. Ours was the pause between songs, the look between sentences, the echo that stays long after the words are gone. And sometimes being seen doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it reveals what was always strong enough to stay standing, even in the light. We didn't mean to drift, not really. It happened the way shadows stretch when the sun shifts. Not suddenly, not liberally, just slowly. One day she was in every corner of my mind. The next, she was only in the ones I hadn't dusted in weeks. Summer came like a confession, hot, sticky, unapologetic. School ended. Schedules vanished, and so did structure. The rooftop stayed, we stayed. But something loosened. We didn't meet every week. Some days it was too hot. Other days she didn't show, and sometimes I didn't either. I got a job at a bookshop. 2 blocks from home, she started taking classes at the art center. Downtown, we didn't talk about the change, didn't name it, but it lived between us anyway. Like the third person in the room, no one wanted to introduce. Then came the invitation. Her family was moving, not far, but far enough. Up different part of the city, far enough that the rooftop would no longer be hers, far enough that the silence might not stretch. That far, she told me, under a half-lit sky, seated on the ledge, legs swinging. I'm leaving, she said, soft, like she was saying sorry and goodbye in the same breath. I stared at my hands, nodded once. When? Next week. That was all. No breakdown, no pleading, no plans. Just the gentle unraveling of something we'd spent a year learning how to weave. We built our last week slowly, like a monument we didn't want to finish. We visited our first rooftop. Again, the gate was unlocked now, the stairs more rusted. But the space remembered us. The air still knew how to hold our names. We brought back old things, the chalk, the thermos, the box of drawings. We left new ones. A poem written on a mirror shard, a drawing of a house with 2 doors, one open, one waiting, one evening. I asked if she ever wished it had been something else. What do you mean? She said, double quotes us. She looked at me like I'd said something fragile then. She answered, no. Her voice was firm, but I wish the world had made space for what we were. On our last day, we made a time capsule. A shoebox inside, we placed the feather she once gave me. It's one of my drawings of the rooftop. A folded note that said, only remember. A photo of our hands, and the cap from her thermos. We buried it under the broken potted plant on the rooftop, marked it with a rock shaped like a heart that didn't try to be perfect. Then we sat, backs to the city, faces to the sky, saying everything without saying anything at the end. She stood, held out her hand. I took it, not like the first time, not like children, like something else, something braver, something that understood the cost of being known. Will we still be us? I asked. She squeezed my hand. We already are. And then she left. No suitcase, no wave, just silence trailing behind her like ribbon. I didn't watch her go. I just stayed. Let the wind have the last word. For weeks, I avoided the rooftop, not because I forgot, but because I remembered too much. I passed it. Sometimes, slowed near the alley, felt its pull like a memory calling itself home. But I kept walking, because some places are better left undisturbed when grief still sits at the edge of them. I wrote her once a letter I never sent. I told her about the bookstore, about a girl who liked poetry and wore her sadness like perfume, about how I missed the sound of her quiet more than any voice I'd ever heard. I ended it with, we didn't end, we just paused. And that's enough for now. One morning, went back to the rooftop. The capsule was still there. The rock still in place, but something else waited. 2 a piece of folded fabric. Her scarf tied around the railing like a flag for the parts of us we hadn't lost. I held it too. My face smelled cinnamon and wind. And I knew she remembered to dot friendship. Isn't always presence. Sometimes it's proof. The scarf, the photo, the fact that even in distance, she still left pieces of herself where I could find them. That meant something. That meant everything. Time passed. She didn't come back. But the rooftop stopped feeling empty. It just felt waiting. And I could live with that, because some people don't leave. They just live in the spaces between your days, in music, in drawings, in letters not sent, and on rooftops, where silence still knows your name. It had been 2 years, not exactly, but close enough that the air had changed its name. I had grown taller, quieter, more myself, and somehow less. The rooftop still existed, but it no longer belonged to us. New paint, new locks, new kids with loud voices, and no idea of what the silence used to sound like. I didn't visit anymore, not because I couldn't, but because some sacred things fade when you try to relive them. Then, out of nowhere, I saw her, not on a rooftop, not in the place where we buried our secrets, but in a bookstore, the one where I used to work. She was standing in the poetry aisle, one hand resting on the spine of a book we once read in fragments. Her hair was shorter, her sleeves longer. She turned before I could decide whether to walk away or speak. And then, without surprise, without hesitation, she smiled. There was no shock between us, no awkward hello, just gravity, the soft kind that never unlearns the shape of its pull. She walked toward me. No hurry, no words. When she reached me, she held out her hand. Not like a stranger, not like a memory. Just like someone who had come back to a place they never really left. I took it, and just like that, we were back. We didn't speak right away, didn't ask what the other had become. We just walked out of the store into the street down a road neither of us remembered but both trusted. She pointed at the sky, smiled, and said, "You still look like him." "Who?" I asked. "The boy who never needed words." We found a bench, not high like the rooftop, but high enough to see the city breathe. She pulled out a paper bag. Inside was the thermos, the same one. Worn, scratched, but whole. "I never used it again," she said. "Why not?" She looked at me and answered without blinking. "It wasn't about the tea." We passed it back and forth. No cinnamon this time, just warm water and memory. And it was enough. She told me she'd moved again, across the city. Studied literature, painted on the weekends. Still didn't like mirrors. Still folded poems into her pockets. I told her I was teaching art, still drawing bridges, still waiting for her to come back. She looked at me then, and in that look, I found every silence we had ever shared. "I came to the rooftop once," she said. "When? A year ago? Why? To see if it remembered us." I smiled. "Did it?" She shook her head. "But I did." Later that evening, we returned to the rooftop. The lock was gone. The sky was low and golden. The air had the taste of maybe. We climbed slowly, hands brushing railings that had once known us. At the top, everything had changed. But when she sat in her old spot and I sat in mine, the world stopped pretending. And suddenly everything was as it had been. We didn't talk much, didn't need to, just looked out at the sky. She reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth, opened it slowly. Inside was the time capsule. The original, the box. The rock, the scarf. "I took it before I left," she said. "I wanted to keep something." She placed it between us again, no longer hidden. Now, returned. Like a gift, or a second chance. We spent the night opening old pieces, holding them like prayers. She unfolded the poem I'd written, touched the drawing, ran her fingers along the edge of the photo. "I never stopped being this girl," she whispered. "I just got better at hiding her." "I never stopped being the boy," I said. "I just forgot how to listen." She looked at me then, with eyes that knew what it meant to lose things you never thought you'd find again, and we both nodded, like a sentence. We didn't need to finish. She stayed in the city after that, not close, not far enough to make space and still feel seen. We didn't rebuild the same friendship. We built a new one with new silences. New words, still soft, still sacred, still full of the kind of language most people will never learn. One night, I got a letter, folded into the shape of a star. Inside, she wrote, "We weren't a story. We were a feeling, and feelings don't end. They echo." I placed the letter in my sketchbook, between drawings of bridges and doors and girls, holding thermoses. I didn't reply, not with words. Instead, I climbed to the rooftop again, left a small rock, painted blue, shaped like a comma, because this, whatever it is, still isn't over. The years didn't rush. They crept, the way fog drags itself through alleyways, without asking for permission. One minute we were teenagers on rooftops. The next, we were adults pretending to know what we were doing. She got a job at a publishing house, started editing poetry, started writing less of it, said it felt strange correcting words when all she ever believed in was the space between them. I taught middle school art, spent hours showing kids how to draw what they couldn't say. I told them silence wasn't empty. They looked at me like speaking another language. Maybe. I was .w sometimes at a bench, sometimes in a bookstore, sometimes nowhere at all, just a message. A drawing, a voice note with music in the background, and a sigh at the end. We never let too much time pass. But time still passed. Anyway, it always does. She started seeing someone. I didn't ask questions, didn't press. He had soft eyes and firm opinions. He called her Sabs. She never flinched at it, but she never smiled either. She introduced us once at a cafe. I smiled politely. He asked how long we'd known each other. She said, "Long enough." And he looked confused, because time doesn't always look like years. Sometimes it looks like drawings on napkins and fingers brushing over rooftops. He wouldn't understand. I didn't expect him to. Later that night, she sent me a voice note. "I don't know how to explain what we are." She said. I listened to it twice, didn't respond, just stared at my ceiling and whispered, "You don't have to." But I knew she didn't hear that part. We saw each other less that year, not because anything broke, but because life kept rearranging the furniture. She was busy. I was busy, and we both pretended. We didn't notice the calendar, didn't count the weeks, didn't feel the absence like a dull pressure behind the ribs. One afternoon, I walked past the rooftop. It was quiet, empty. I climbed it for the first time in months, sat on the ledge, traced the paint flaking off the railing, left a folded piece of paper under the brick. One word, still. 2 weeks later, I got a postcard. It wasn't signed, didn't need to be. It read, "Even silence knows how to wait." The next time I saw her, she wasn't wearing the ring anymore. I didn't ask, she didn't explain. We just walked through the city. Didn't say much, ended up in front of a mural neither of us had seen before. 2 hands reaching toward each other, not touching, just reaching. We stood there for a long time, until she whispered, "Do you think we're still that?" What? Reaching? I looked at the painting, then at her. I think we never stopped. We sat in a cafe after. She stirred her tea without sipping it. "I think I forgot how to talk to you," she said. "I don't think we ever really talked," I replied. She laughed, but there was sadness in it. "Then how did you always know what I meant?" I shrugged. Same way you always knew when I was about to disappear. She reached across the table, touched my wrist lightly, and that one touch felt like 2 years collapsing into a single breath. I asked her what happened with him, with the version of her that looked so sure. She said he wanted a name for everything. And you didn't. I already had one for us. The world just didn't recognize it. That night, we didn't go to the rooftop. We didn't need to. We just walked, block after block, until our feet hurt and our past felt smaller than our present. Then we sat on a curb, shared a bag of grapes, passed them back and forth like we used to pass the thermos. She leaned her head on my shoulder. No words, just a city breathing around us, and I realized we weren't reaching anymore. We had arrived quietly, finally, without the world noticing. Still, the world kept moving. She traveled for work. I started dating someone who loved loud things. We both tried to hold space to protect the silence from all the noise. But life has a way of speaking over you, sometimes even the strongest. Language gets drowned out by the volume of the world. We didn't end, but we paused, like a song interrupted by static. I stopped hearing from her for a while. No texts, no scarf tied around a railing. But I still walked past the rooftop once a week, still left tiny things behind. A sketch, a poem, a blue stone, even when I didn't know if she'd come. Even when I wasn't sure if we were still we. Then one evening, there was something new. A napkin tucked under the brick. My name. In her handwriting, folded twice, inside was a drawing. 2 bridges built in opposite directions, meeting in the middle. Below it, she had written, "I never stopped building." And just like that, I exhaled, not a sigh. Not relief, just a quiet breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Because when something real exists even in fragments, even in silence, even beneath 1,000 versions of who you've become, doesn't vanish, it waits. I once read that the deepest kind of love is the kind that never demands to be seen. It just shows up, stays soft, stays true, even when no one is watching, even when no one claps, even when the world calls it something it never was. Years passed. Not all at once, but gradually, like pages turning themselves, sometimes slowly, sometimes in wind. She moved again, this time for good, out of the city, out of the world. We knew a small town near the sea. She didn't tell me until she was already gone. Just left a letter under the brick. Folded inside a weathered envelope, it said, "The silence between us is still the loudest thing I know." And that was enough. I didn't chase her, didn't call, didn't ask for more. Because what we had was never built on possession. It was built on presence, and presence doesn't need to be constant, it just needs to be real. We sent letters, not often, but deeply. She would send photos of the sea. I would send sketches of bridges. She told me about the birds that came to her window every morning. I told her about my students who still didn't understand silence but were starting to trust it. We never said, "I miss you." We never said, "I love you." But it was there in every comma, every pause, every folded edge. One winter, I received a small box. No return address. Inside was the thermos clean, wrapped in linen, and a note that simply read, "For your next rooftop." I stared at it for a long time, then poured myself a cup of tea, drank it under the stars, alone, but not lonely. Some friendships are not chapters. They are the whole book, unspoken, underlined, bent at the corners where someone kept rereading the same line over and over. I never saw her again in person, but I heard from her, always just enough. A birthday message with a drawing of the sky. A photograph of a bench with 2 cups and no people. A single sentence on a postcard with no signature. "I still remember your silence." And then one year, nothing came. No note, no drawing, no echo. I waited a month, then 2, then 6, and still nothing. Grief doesn't always arrive in black. Sometimes it comes in blank spaces. In empty mailboxes, in rooftops that feel too still. I thought maybe she was gone, in the kind of way that can't be reversed. I didn't have her address, only a town name, only a few hints, so I went, took a train, brought. The thermos didn't bring expectations, just a memory. The town was quiet, more sea than sound. I asked a few people if they knew her. No one did, or maybe they had been told not to say. I walked for hours, found a library, an art store, a pier. Then I saw it, a rooftop cafe with wind chimes and blue curtains. A scarf tied around the railing my heart knew before my eyes did. I climbed. Each step a prayer, each breath a sentence at the top. There was a bench, a small table, and under the tabula box, wrapped in the same linen she used for the thermos. I opened it with hands I didn't know could still tremble. Inside was a sketch dot of me, alone on rooftop, holding a cup of tea and smiling. Underneath, in small handwriting, "If you found this, then you knew. I never needed a goodbye. Only someone who knew where to listen." I sat down, poured tea into the cup. I brought, watched the ocean move without apology. The silence wrapped itself around me. Not cold, not cruel, just full. Complete, like her, like us. I stayed there until the sun sank, left the drawing exactly where I found it. Didn't take it with me, because some things aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be. Returned to the wind, to the memory, to the rooftop. I still don't know if she's gone. Not really. Maybe. She just stopped sending letters. Maybe she moved again. Maybe she became the wind she always listened to. But I do know this: she was never mine, and it was never hers. But we were something. Something so gentle the world forgot how to label it, so we never let it try. Our friendship was never loud, never official, never framed on walls or written in bold. It was a whisper, a held hand, a bridge drawn on a napkin, a scarf on a railing, a thermos shared under a city sky, and that's all it needed to be. Some friendships are not made to last, but some are not made to end. They live where silence breathes, where language fails, where two souls find each other and simply say, "I know you." And then that's it.